Welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, the live TV show all about the legal aspects of your business to help educate you on complex legal terms in an easy to understand manner, to help understand why you need to do certain things in your business from a legal point of view, and to help you develop a plan for the future. Our mission at Business Legal Lifecycle is to help empower all small to medium-sized businesses around the world to get access to legal advice so that they can help build their communities and make the world a better place.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle. I am Craig Mason. I have with me Jeremy. Say hello to everyone, please. Jeremy.
Hi everyone, hope you're having a great Wednesday.
It is indeed Wednesday. Today is one of our interview shows where we get someone onto the show to join us and share with our listeners and our viewers some great information, tips and valuable information that they can use in their business and throughout their business life cycle. Today we have Jeremy, an interview with Nigel Clark. So he's from Peregine Law. Now, if you've listened to any of our previous shows or subscribed Facebook and those sorts of things, you would have seen that Jeremy was over in the UK on the 27th of November of 2018 to launch the Business Legal Lifecycle UK edition of his book. So the partner in drafting that book was Nigel Clark from Peregine Law. So we wanted to have Nigel on the show to explain about him and his business and to go through some of the key differences in the UK edition of the Business Legal Lifecycle to the Australian version. So that's what the interview is about. Jeremy, do you want to intro into the interview and mention anything you'd like to say about Nigel?
Yeah, so Nigel, we connected at the beginning of 2018 and really formed a really good relationship, working relationship with regards to the Business Legal Lifecycle in the UK edition. Nigel's a lawyer with over 20 years experience practicing around the world. He qualified as a lawyer in the UK in 1999 and has worked in Australia and Hong Kong. He's and Beijing as well, actually. So he's worked around the world. Peregine Law provides high quality corporate advice to the UK and overseas SMEs. He's a real global lawyer, which is great. And they look at themselves as a new style law firm with a new way of working. I tell you, I sat in his office on the 27th for the day with him, and he really is that different kind of lawyer that is really cool. And it's really cool to see. So this is a wide-ranging interview. We go through a lot of topics. We touch on Brexit, and so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But without any further ado, I hope you enjoy my interview with Nigel Clark.
Welcome, Nigel, to Business Legal Lifecycle TV and our podcast.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good to be here.
Excellent. And thank you for all the hard work you put into the UK edition. It was really good fun to come over there and launch it a couple of weeks ago. So thank you for that.
Hey, look, it's been fun to be involved, and it's a very impressive initiative. So looking forward to staying in touch on it and and working with you towards global domination for the Business League.
Global domination, I like that. All right, well, I wanted to start off with a bit about you and your business. Can you tell us a bit about your history and how did you get into law?
I kind of fell into law, which I think a lot of people do, certainly in the UK. I was a geography student at university. I've always loved learning about people and the world around me, I guess, and I was one of a number of geographers in my family. I'm the youngest of four.
Yep.
And then I sort of started head scratching at university, and I probably should have done that when I was a bit younger.
Yep.
And then you work out, how do I make a living from geography? Being more of an academic, less of a vocational subject, you'd start head thinking. And then I was reasonably good at writing words. Not brilliant at arguments, but pretty good at analytics and writing, and law seemed to be a fairly good place to go. So I converted to law after university, and then I'm still here.
Yeah, very good. And it's amazing, we've known each other for a year now, and I had no idea on the geography thing, and that was my passion when I was at high school as well. So there you go. It's amazing the similarities.
There we go. Well, the travellers like you and I, and people who want to work with the rest of the world, I guess it's sort of inbuilt.
Yeah, it becomes a natural part of what we want. And so you started Peregine Law a few years ago. So why did you move into your own business?
Yeah, so we started Peregrine in 2016. So there's two of us that founded it, own it. I guess I saw Peregrine and setting up my own business as a second career, really. I had 20 years in what I would call, and I think the term of art is certainly used in this market, of big law.
Yep.
I spent 20 years in a big London law firm, and then in one of Australia's biggest firms. And that it was a 20-year career. Absolutely loved it. Worked in a number of countries around the world. Kind of got to a point where I was looking for something different. Personally, I think a different challenge, and I also got to a point where I wanted to be involved in whatever capacity I can in trying to move the legal industry forward a little bit on the way that our clients and customers are serviced, and on the way that lawyers can affect their careers and have career progression and that sort of stuff. So I'm still within the industry very much, but I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial scratch, or itch I needed to scratch.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of us, small law firm owners have, that entrepreneurial itch that we need to scratch. So I think that's great. So you obviously got a lot of experience in the legal industry, having worked and around the world. It's I went through that in the introduction, as you know, and it's very impressive, all of your experience. How do you think, or how do you see that's helping you with what you're doing now?
I'm a big fan, and I talk to my children about this too. I'm a big fan of life perspective.
Yep.
I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but you get older and wiser and begin to reflect on things. And I think experience can be a dangerous thing, but it's also a very useful thing for applying it to situations and that sort of stuff. And I think I have a fairly holistic view of private practice legal industry, or how legal services can be delivered, both up from a retail high street level up into the sort of largest cross-border global deals. So I think I'm very aware of what good lawyering, good legal service delivery looks like. I'm also trying to become more aware of what clients want, and I think having worked in some of the big deals around the world, and having worked through the global financial crisis, and then also having worked in China and Australia and the UK. Particularly China, just for the fact it was so different, to understand how businesses approach culturally, the use of advisors and stuff. So I just think it's given me a perspective that I'm trying to harness when I'm looking at our day-to-day business.
Yeah, excellent. And the China law is an interesting. It's very different to the English and Australian law, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the laws are completely different, albeit they've taken stuff from civil code and common law and built up. Obviously, they've had their own civilization developing over the last 4,000 years, but it goes way beyond the law, of course. I mean, there's obviously the language challenges, but culturally, culturally approaching a legal issue, as it were, from a Chinese perspective is so different that I learned an incredible amount in the 3 years that I was in China on that. Just to come at things with an open mind and without preconceived ideas and assumptions that are subconsciously are ingrained in us all if we grow up, particularly in a Western jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we'll have to have further chats about that when we're ready to go for the Chinese edition of the Business Legal Lifecycle.
Yeah, sorry, that's a whole another topic.
We'll get you back on to talk about that in more detail when we go there in a few years' time. But I wanted to talk a bit about UK law. So the people who listen to this podcast and watch the YouTube videos of they're a broad range. They're from Australia, the US, and the UK, and we worked together in 2018 to produce the Business Legal Lifecycle UK edition, which was a lot of fun. What were some of the key differences between the UK and Australian laws that you saw?
So it's interesting, and the UK and Australia, for clearly there's a shared history, and over the last couple of hundred years, there's the divergence in history, and we're in the middle of of interesting changes around that. Common law jurisdiction. And if you look at common law jurisdictions around the world, and you can learn the history about it all, of course, but the concepts are the same.
Yep.
And the approach to applying law to personal situations or business situations are the same. And so I've effectively practiced UK law for 22 years, and I think Australian law for about 16, 17 years. So I've seen it in practice, running alongside each other. And the way I used to talk to clients about it, and I still do, frankly, is to say that UK law and Australian law is very similar, but which doesn't really make but in the sense of you can actually safely assume that the law is going to be very similar until there are specific areas where it's completely different. Of course, Australia is a federal country, so that creates differences and more similarity to something like the US.
Yep.
So you've got to be wary of state-based law as well as law. But I mean, the key difference that I've always tried to think of are I suppose, with Australian law is, or between the two, are tax and real estate. I think real estate, again, conceptually it's the same, and tax is the one area that is really, really different. And tax, as you know, Jeremy, drives a lot of decisions at the business level. And when we were doing the book together, we can see from the use of structures, corporate vehicles and structures, that actually there are some serious differences in the UK and Australia, and a lot of those are driven by tax. And the tax landscapes that Australia have gone with, or the UK have gone with over the last 30 to 50 years.
Yeah, and I found that very interesting, learning about limited liability partnerships. Do you want to just speak about what they are? And because over here we have limited liability partnerships, but no one uses them, and that's really the tax reasons. And we use companies, proprietary limited companies instead.
Oh, the limited liability partnerships been fantastic for lawyers. I think most lawyers now hide behind limited liability partnerships. They give the partnership the benefit of having limited liability as a company does. In legal jargon for companies, it's called the corporate veil. So the liability only goes as far as the amount that's been invested in shareholders, and it sits within the company. The danger, I think, with partnerships is, and certainly, and I've been a partner of a business before, is that it's a look through, straight through to the individual. So, you know, your house is on the line effectively when you're doing business through a partnership, and it's a tough place to be. The regime in the UK is that partnerships, they're not really an entity, so particularly for tax purposes. So you're taxed at an individual level within a partnership. It's the same for a limited liability partnership. You're taxed as an individual level, but you get the benefits of the corporate protection, the limited liability protection, and you're also treated as a corporate. It does actually mean you have to publish your accounts. You also register in the UK with the government agency that's called Companies House. So it's a hybrid between the traditional partnership and the company. But the clear benefit for it is the limited liability point. And to be honest, certainly in advisors' world, we're all just sheep. As soon as one law firm and accountancy firm were prepared to go with the limited liability partnership, and we're prepared to publish their accounts every year, and it's all been transparent. Frankly, I think 95% of law firms that are set up at partnerships now in the UK, for example, are limited liability partnerships. And why wouldn't you be?
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, if it affords you that protection, that's great. And you mentioned property before, and as been another one that was a key difference. What are some of the differences that you've seen in the property space?
The way that you hold property is quite similar, and the way that you would borrow money and secure it against property in terms of mortgages, charges is quite similar, but everything else actually between the UK, and I know within Australia, of course, it's different.
Yeah.
State you're in, state or territory you're in. But so there are key difference around how property is taxed.
Yep.
There are, I think property is probably the one area where there are differences year on year on year.
Yep.
But I think the two countries are getting wider apart, and I'm not doing very well now in thinking of specifics, but
That's all right.
the way that you can, the way that trusts are used in Australia is very different.
Yep.
The way that you can list certain property vehicles is very different. So it's the one area that I would say it's quite dangerous to make the assumption I was talking about a few minutes ago, that the law is very similar, because if you're actually dealing in bricks and mortar, is quite different.
And I think that's a good distinction. And yeah, you're right, absolutely right, that in Australia, Queensland, where I'm from, the law on how you do a conveyance is one way. You go to New South Wales, it's different. Victoria, it's different again. And I think one of the concepts in the book is that we talk in broad concepts so that people can actually get a basic understanding, but then go and get the advice from your local lawyer, because it is all different. And there's no way that you can know everything, because with so many different jurisdictions around the world, there's so many specifics that you need to get the right advice from.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, depending on whatever industry you're in, you're really going to be conscious of what products are you dealing with.
Yep.
What are the assets of your business, and just think about individually how the law sits around what you're buying and selling, or what service you're providing, and what you own within the business. People are the same, and people are dealt with quite similarly across the world, of course, about how people engage with a business or trade business. But it's the actual fundamental goods and services you've got to be really conscious and get local advice.
Yeah.
The refreshing thing, and you're very, very good at this, is there are now, and this is part of the whole globalization process, there are now very smart people or advisors who sit in countries around the world who have experience and can take business into other countries. Both, and what I'm really enjoying about the last 10 years, and obviously where you and I are in business, is that that sort of advice and the ability to go offshore from whichever country is your home used to be only accessible to the largest multinationals of this world, the BHPs,
Yep.
the BPs in this country. But now actually, every startup, every small business now can tap into global experience, which is wonderful, because those of us who work in the advisory world like this, we're spending a lot of time and investment and wanting to build relationships with people all over the world to provide a really good landscape for small businesses to trade.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So were there any other key differences that come to mind between the two laws?
I would suggest maybe watch this space, as the UK is going through a fairly interesting time at the moment.
We'll get there in a few minutes.
With Europe, yeah. Watch this space in Australia. Of course, the way that property is held, it depends if there's a Republican in government. You never know. Things can change, and laws evolve rapidly.
I think the important thing there is to never just assume that it's the same as it's always been, and go and get advice, at the time, to make sure that it's right. And because there's lots of I was, in preparation for the call, I had a quick look through the book and the marked up version, and there's lots of little changes, but as you said earlier, there's nothing major. Conceptually, it's very, very similar, because Australia is based on UK law, and when the UK adopts something, or Australia adopts something that the other one's interested in, the other one adopts it as well. And so they are very similar. And that kind of comes into my next question, was about, and you've worked across borders, so you had a bit more experience than I did on this, but were you surprised by the small number of differences?
I wasn't, because having worked sort of both UK and Australian advisor for so many years, when we do the Chinese edition, then you'll see You'll see a difference in the markup. But it is, and it, I mean, look, frankly, that's why if you're starting a business in the UK, or you're starting a business in Australia or New Zealand or Canada or India, actually, that common law base, Canada may be different, or South Africa, you can look at a possible country that you want to start trading with, doing business with, hiring people from, whatever, and it's just an easier place to start. It's very interesting here, obviously. We sit within Europe, and our biggest trading partner is mainland Europe, of course, and that, as far as I'm concerned. But the differences between the civil code are obviously, they're much more marked, the difference in French and German law and English law stuff. But you know what? Conceptually, when you're dealing with business, actually, because of globalization and I guess since World War II and the people wanting to trade overseas and people businesses getting stuff manufactured in one jurisdiction and sold in another and doing research somewhere else, actually, I think business law, and for good reasons, to help people do business across the world, is starting to converge, because the concepts are becoming more and more similar. So you know this, Jeremy. If you want to buy a company in a different jurisdiction or sell a business, actually, we're dealing with this all the time with the US and Europe and with Asia. Actually, the approach is very similar to how it would be, and who's taking what risk. And then you just need to drill down into that, the specific legal differences. Just going back to a couple of things I was thinking of actually that I hadn't mentioned yet. Differences is that we would want the listeners to be really aware of is the movement of people, of course, is approached differently.
Yes.
So the immigration laws, and they change a lot, don't they? And they change with government all the time, right?
Yeah.
That's something that you really do need to be aware of. And I suppose that similar to the movement of people is the movement of goods.
Yep.
So it's customs controls and all that sort of stuff. When you are delivering a service, and whether it's a sales tax point or whether actually you can physically move a product into a different country. You and I are moving books between Australia and the UK at the moment, which is fun. But that is something that businesses really need to be aware of, and I would absolutely get advice. Starting to press, right, we're going to do business, because movement of people and movement of goods and services clearly very different at the country.
Absolutely, and every country's got their own rules and regulations about that. So that we've alluded to it, or you've alluded to a couple of times. Some of the key legal challenges with the UK right now. Do you want to talk about what some of those are? Like we're doing this in December 2018, so it might change as we go. But what are some of the key legal challenges facing the businesses in the UK right now?
It is number one on the list. Britain's exit from the European Union. And December 2018, we are still exiting from the European Union, and that will happen on the 29th of March 2019. Whatever, there is still time, and Europe, I think, would very much welcome the idea that the UK changes its mind. But so that is actually it'll be of interest to history students in the UK for many, many years to come. We're in the middle of an amazing political turmoil around this, and for one, believe actually the Western democracies all over the world are in a major shift. Without getting into a political discussion, there is a real hard look at capitalism generally in Western democracy at the moment, and certainly having lived in China and seen the way it's done there, it's really interesting, I think, how politics will play out over the next 50 years, the next generation, children and their children. But in the UK, my life, I was born in 1973, was when Britain joined the European Union. So I'm in January, I hate to admit it, but anyone can do the maths now. I'm 46 years old in January. And so for 46 years, the UK law between the UK and Europe has got closer and closer together, and we're trying to, we as a country and as a trading bloc are trying to work out how to unpick all that. What is really interesting, and I spend a lot of time talking to other advisors in London, around the UK and Europe as well. As you know, I was in Berlin a couple of weeks ago to a number of Dutch, French advisors there as well. Is there isn't any law yet about Britain's exit and what it'll look like. So we're all guessing. And lawyers as an industry, we're used to interpreting the law and then applying it to the personal or business situation. We've got a situation which is creating massive uncertainty. We know what the current law is when you're sitting within the European Union, but you don't know what the law is going to be like 3, 6, 9, 12 months. I actually think hopefully there's a certain amount of realism that there's just so much to be done that it needs to, various stages need to be pushed out. But at the moment we're getting what will happen and what the legal landscape will look like. I mean, you can make a pretty informed guess that I'm certainly of the view that I don't think things should change dramatically. But it is creating uncertainty, and everything we are currently doing with our clients, it has to be on the agenda list. Have we thought about it? Do we think about that? My general point at a small business level for a number of our clients, and we have some quite mature business clients as well, is that I'm advising them not to invest too much money in trying to understand the situation. Understand. Be very wary of it, but until law around Brexit, you can just need to be aware of what's going on, what might happen. But that's going to have, just from a trade point of view, obviously that's got significant implications. And then the UK situation, of course, of whether or not it tries to change its trading relationships with Australia, with the US, with other key relationship countries. So big times on that, but that's by far and away the most insignificant legal challenge that there is at the moment in the UK. I mean, the other challenges in the UK at the moment, we're a very, very small island, and we have a lot of people. And we have limited number of buildings and limited space of buildings, and that creates lots of pressure. So, and that there are pockets. London is a very big city, which has the same problems as global cities around big cities around the world with the housing problem. And I know that there's been various overheating in various cities in Australia, and Sydney's had a big problem with the heat and that sort of stuff. And I've lived in Hong Kong, and blimey, that's got an extraordinary pressure on space, and they just go up and up and up. And but the pressure of being on a small island that's had a fairly attractive welfare system for some years in the UK has led issues around space, people, that sort of stuff. So that creates difficulty at a labour law level, and it creates difficulty at a premises level. And I'm trying to talk in business practicalities, but there are real challenges around that for law, where it gets very political as well. And there again, there's a significant shift in the way people approach this. So that's challenges for lawmakers and for businesses for working with the laws.
And I'll just say that this isn't a political podcast or show. However, laws are written by politicians, so we need to talk about it. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, we're not about pushing political agendas, but we just state it as it is, and so that's perfectly fine.
Well, exactly. And it's better. I mean, if you're advising a business and you're working with, you've got to stay politically neutral as much as you can, because you just want to look at what's in the best interest. We grow up as lawyers, right? You've got to act in the interests of the client. That's what we're obliged to. We're officers of the court. And business people can take their views over, and so can we when we close the door and go to our home and take a deep breath about what we think about the politics. But just trying to navigate through the laws, of course, it touches politics at every time.
Necessarily does. So on that point, and you've acted for and you continue to act for businesses around the world, what are some of the key challenges working across borders that you see?
I usually flip that sort of question on its head.
Okay.
Because, well, no, and this is what really interests me. Doing business across borders really, really excites me. And frankly, from an advisory perspective, it excites me. You know this as we've been working together. I like to think a bit of what opportunities are there for businesses working across borders. Yep. But absolutely, there are challenges, and there are pros and cons with everything. So in terms of, I think it's very dangerous to look at things too narrowly around. If for example, if you look at differences in law, for me, you're already too narrow.
Yep.
I very much, and China sort of really opened my mind to this is.
Yes.
You've got to understand the culture of where your business is coming from, who you're trying to do business with, and the culture of the country across the border, or multiple borders that you're dealing with. So you've got to understand culture. You've got to understand people. Yep. And I think society is really appreciating more and more now that actually businesses are run by people. You work with a lot of different industries, and you, like me, work with coaches and understanding other and trying understanding of the world before we can apply, sort of micro level decisions. But everybody works in jargon. Yep. But B2C, business to customer, business to consumer, and B2B, people used to talk about this. It took me a few years to understand what on earth they were talking about, to be honest. But
same.
B2B, right? Okay, so business to business. I actually think, and I've heard people say this as well, so it's not just me that's saying this, but it's more, now in today's society, it's much more about B2P, business to people.
Yeah.
So whether you're selling soft drinks or ice cream, or whether you're selling legal services, or whether you're selling education, it's actually people. And there's the sales expression that people buy from people. So I think when you're working across borders, and that's why I mean, start with culture, culture and language and people. That's the absolutely sort of 1, 2, and 3. I think you need to understand when you're working across borders. And so if you look at it from what's the challenge is, you need to spend some time to understand the differences in the countries you're going to be working with. And if you don't, I think you can expect to run into difficult situations. And it's absolutely worth investing the time. And there's so much information available. I mean, the internet, God bless it. So you have no excuse for not researching the situation. So, that absolutely is the first thing. And I think leading on from everything else leads on from that. So in terms of challenges, you need to work with people that understand that. If you want an understanding of that, is do you need the languages in your team of people? We're very lucky as English speakers that English seems to be the language of choice in business at the moment. Very, very lucky.
Yes, very much so.
I sit in Europe and we just take it for granted. It's terrible, and it's one of my embarrassments that I don't speak a number of languages. But so I think for me, and I know you asked what are the challenges. I think it's just
that's fine.
Culture.
And that's a huge challenge, and that's something that people just don't realize just how different it is. So even between the UK and Australia, there are differences, even though we're so similar. And the UK and the Australia and the US, or the UK and the US, there's differences. Like the US like to use Z's in their words, and we hate it. And if I'm talking to a British person, I need to talk about the weather, and understandably so. So there are there are cultural differences, and even when with a culture that's so similar, like our cultures are so similar, there are still key differences, and people need to understand that. So I think that's a really good distinction and a really good starting point for people to do. And there's lots of great resources, as you say, out there on the internet. Lots of great resources, and just talking to people who've done it before can really help people get an understanding of that as well. But, yeah, is there any key resources that you've got on that, or
in terms of understanding
culture?
yeah, understanding culture. I mean, for me, you can read stuff.
Yep.
You can read stuff. I mean, the joy of things now is the podcasts and the YouTubes, and you can find out what there is. So much out there that you can just find out what works for you. I think.
Yeah.
I always approach it by just talk to people.
Yep.
With your own network, whether you've done stuff across border or not.
Yep.
You'd be surprised. A lot of people have. I mean, the Australians, you're great travelers.
Yeah, we have to be.
Meet Australians. I've worked with Australians for 15 years, and I meet Australians all the time, and I adore Australians. I've said that out loud because
I've got a lot of recording now.
But so you've just probably 70% of Australians I've met have done an OS, who've done an overseas trip and stuff, and learned to know people. So there is so much. It's just not something you should try and do on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to travel. I made the comment before, we have to, if we want to go and see the world, we have to travel. We have to be prepared to sit on a plane, because otherwise you can't see anything. So look, we could talk about culture. I mean, that's probably a whole podcast in itself, about cultures around the world. But I wanted to just move on. I like to ask all the guests on the podcast and TV show about the future. Disruption is one of the buzzwords that's out there. It has been for a few years now. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges for just the legal industry itself in, say, the next 5 years?
The legal industry, and this is the reasons why I set up a new business a couple of years ago, the legal industry is one of the sort of oldest, most traditional industries, certainly in our culture and heritage. And it's probably one of the industries that's been most resistant to change.
Yep.
I actually think that it's now evolving, changing as rapidly as I've ever seen it, in a positive way, both for the consumers, the buyers of legal services, and for those of us who work within the industry. And that's because of a number of reasons. One very much is technology.
Yep.
Of course. And one is just, another is because of general society. People want things differently now. And whether you think it's good or bad, people want things faster, quicker. People make decisions on the fly, much more so. They have this access to information, which we've just been talking about. And degree of legal advice needs to fit into this new type of world. And I think that applies to whether you're a very, very large business or whether you're buying a house and you need advice at that level. And I see the shape and the way that legal services need to be delivered really changing fast. And I think the challenge for lawyers and for the industry as a whole is to how to adapt to what's happened in society. And I think we've been a bit resistant to that because law as an industry, people have generally done quite well. And that's reached a real tipping point for me now.
Yep.
Because actually, when law is done good and when you meet good lawyers, it's helpful. It enables businesses. It's not, I don't want people to see it as a necessary evil. You don't want people to see it as a handbrake to doing business, but actually good lawyers can make it easier, and it's a fantastic thing, as are good accountants, and you help you do business.
Yep. And
I think in today's society, and I certainly can speak for the UK and to an extent Australia, it's just the way that now fits into the world. And so lawyers are sort of scratching their heads going, how can we do it? And it just needs to be appropriate, fit for purpose in 2019 and beyond, I think. And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Because I talk to friends of mine, and you and I talk to lots of other people who are out there in businesses, not in legal, but who would ordinarily assume that they would be talking to lawyers all the time and having help with that sort of stuff. And less so now, but 5 years ago, they might have just ignored.
Yeah.
They might have taken what we would call the legal risk because there just wasn't access to services that were delivered in a way that they want to be delivered. So the challenge is for law is to, and I'm quite critical about the industry sometimes. I think I just say just get with the program.
Yep.
The world's, we can't deliver services that were appropriate 40 years ago.
Yep.
Today.
Yep.
And law needs to get fast. And technology is just it's an enabler for us to do that.
Yeah, and that's one of the key challenges that we're trying to address with what we're doing with the business legal lifecycle. So I think that's very true and very timely. What about for yourself? What's next on the horizon for you?
So what we're trying to do at Peregine Law is we're trying to take the access to legal services and make it international, as it were. So if for a small business around the world, you can have access, as I was talking about before, to lawyers and advisors, professional services that know how to do business that can help you, whichever country you might be going to. So, as I said, that level of assistance has always been available. Well, has been available since big companies went global.
Yep.
What I'm trying to do, and I know you're trying to do it as well, is to enable small companies to have access to that. So that's constantly in my mind is what do we want to do. So we, the big challenge for us is we already have people working with Peregine who live outside the UK.
Yep.
I'm trying to deliver a platform that helps our lawyers who can work wherever they want to work. If they have a laptop, they have a phone, they have a Wi-Fi connection, and also deliver something that's best for the client. So it's about offering best value and offering career paths for lawyers and best value for clients. So we are spending a lot of time, and as you know, we've just operations director to build our back office infrastructure. So that we can do everything on a portal, on a desktop. And if people want to meet face to face, that's absolutely fine. But do this around the world face to face. So constantly trying to challenge ourselves to do that.
Excellent.
So it's exciting, really exciting.
It is. And I think that's great. And I think that's something that as an industry, we need to be embracing that type of technology to make our ability to service our clients. And as you said before, it's what the client wants that's important, not necessarily what we want. And that's a big challenge for lawyers moving forward. And I think that's a really good way to do that is to help facilitate that through your business. So I think that's really good. Nigel, I think we've given a lot of value today. I think there's a lot of information that we've given today, but I can't let you go without going through our quick fire questions. So I'm just going to ask you a question. If you can just give me the first thought that comes to mind.
Okay.
You ready? How did you make your first dollar?
I was a court coverer at Wimbledon tennis championships.
Oh, nice. Excellent.
And it rains a lot, right?
Yeah, it rains. I was going to ask what year that was, but I won't be rude. What is a book that you think every business owner should read? Other than legal lifecycle.
Business legal lifecycle. I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's the 7 Effective Ways of Working.
Yep.
You know the one.
Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Thank you. That's it.
Yep.
I got pointed to. Yes, that's very good. You can just dip in and pick stuff out of that.
It's an awesome book. Yeah, we'll link up a link to that in the show notes because it's an old book, but the lessons in it are as timeless as ever. And the final question is, if you could give advice to your younger self, what would that advice be?
So I have 3 younger selves now. if I could give up, do something that you love doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Work out what you love doing and do it. I mentioned at the top of the podcast that I fell into law. I love helping people, and that's part of my makeup.
Yep.
So I love helping people, and I'm in an industry now, and I'm in a fortunate position where I can do that.
Yep.
So
it's awesome. Good message. Well, thank you. That's it for those. I suppose the only other question I've really got is there anything that we've missed that you think is important that you want to get over to the viewers and listeners today?
I listen to it back, probably missed loads, but I would I think that a real message for me, for businesses, one is overcome fear.
Yep.
You know, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to fail. Embrace change. Go for it. And actually, even within your own country and even across borders, there are a lot of people trying to do this, and the benefits far outweigh the negatives. You'll learn so much, and starting and running businesses and networking, what a great place to be. It's wonderful. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, awesome. That's a really good message. And the final question I have is, where can people reach you if they'd like to discuss anything with you from our interview today?
Sadly, I'm reachable 24/7. But anyway,
don't say that.
I would suggest people have a look at peregrinelaw.com.
Yep.
And they'll find it there.
Excellent. Well, Nigel, thank you so much again for all the work you did with me on working on the book. The launch back in the 27th of November, I thought went really, really well. We're going to link in the show notes to a page that we've put up on our website with some photos and a copy of the video. Sound quality is not the best. That was, we kind of expected that, but there's some really good information that we got out of that launch. So thank you so much for your time in doing that and your time today.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's been fun.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Nigel Clark. He's a really interesting fellow. He's got a really good way of practicing law. All his contact details are in the show notes, so please have a look there. Have a look at the workbook, and we'll link it in the show notes to a copy of the launch and where you can buy a UK version of the book. Craig, do you want to finish off?
Yeah, so as Jeremy said, the show notes, this is show 163. So we're moving along close to our 200th show, which will be towards the beginning of next year, which is exciting times ahead. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks, Nigel, for giving up some time to come on the show. And we look forward to you coming along and viewing or listening to our next show. Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Bye.